Hey guys, it's Dr. Childs here, and today I want to answer the question, is Synthroid gluten-free? And so we're just going to jump right to the conclusion here and tell you that yes, Synthroid is gluten-free, and we're going to be talking about this study to sort of prove that. But if that's the only thing that you were looking for, then feel free to leave. But I think that we're going to be talking about some other useful information, including some of the other inactive ingredients that could be causing you issues. So let's dig into the study and we'll talk about that. So you can find this study. It's open access and it's labeled here: gluten and aluminum content in Synthroid, levothyroxine sodium tablets. If you just Google this thing, it'll pop right up, so you should be able to find it. So just Google that phrase. And well, I wanted to talk about this because I think it's important. And so let's start by talking about, why does it matter if it's gluten-free? Why does it matter if thyroid medication is gluten-free? And the answer is pretty straightforward. So we know that the most common cause of hypothyroidism in the United States is due to Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is an autoimmune disease. So put that in the back of your head. Now, celiac disease is also an autoimmune disease, and if you know anything about autoimmune diseases, you know they tend to go together. So if you have one, you have a much higher risk of developing another. And so the risk that a Hashimoto's patient has also celiac disease is about 5%. So that's about 1 in 20. And if you consider that anywhere between 70 to 90% of people who have hypothyroidism have Hashimoto's, there's probably a large percentage of people out there who have celiac disease or who can't tolerate gluten who aren't aware of it. And part of the problem is that the pharmaceutical companies and industries, or just as a whole, they don't do a good job explaining if things are gluten-free or not. And they're not necessarily required to do that. And so they obviously don't. So it actually requires a fair bit of work on your part if you want to determine if any of your drugs are gluten-free. And what they do, in order to understand how gluten gets in there, you kind of need to understand this term called excipients. And so excipients is a name which is used to define all of the ingredients inside of a medication. So if you're taking Synthroid, you might think to yourself, well, okay, Synthroid just has the T4 medication that I need in it. And that's rarely ever the case. In fact, most medications contain a whole list of very strange ingredients designed to change the color of the capsule or the pill, to change how it is absorbed, to change how it looks, and all of these things, the shape, etc. And so these are known as binders, fillers, dyes, protectants, lubricators, and bulking agents. And all of these things, including the active ingredient, are inside of the pill that you're taking. Now the problem is there's a lot of different excipients, and these excipients, even though they're technically safe, they are known to cause issues. And so taking the medication, whenever you're taking a medication, you have to consider these excipients. And in the case of gluten, they can be, one of the excipients could be a starch, and that could be a wheat starch, and the starch is used for one of those purposes that we just mentioned, and then that would be an inadvertent way that you would be getting gluten in there, but you wouldn't know unless you knew the breakdown of those medications. So that's why this is important. So let's come down here and we'll talk about the gluten for just a second. So what they did here in this study is they took levothyroxine, or Synthroid, sorry, they took Synthroid, and there's a lot of different components to it, and you can see all the components here, and they tested each of these components individually to determine the concentration of gluten. And so you can see here that the concentration was an undetectable level, which is less than 3.0 parts per million. And so that's enough to say that each individual part is gluten-free. Now, there isn't a standard for the pharmaceutical industry, but in the food industry, anything less than 20 parts per million would be considered to be gluten-free. So when you add all these up and you look at them, it technically is gluten-free. However, take a look at some of these ingredients. So you have talc, you have lactose monohydrate, acacia, sugar, magnesium, povidone. Then you have all these dyes. So all these different dyes, and all of these things would be included in the list of excipients. Now, just because it doesn't have gluten in it doesn't mean that you won't react to something in here, especially this one, lactose monohydrate, which is lactose. All right, and so there are some people who are lactose intolerant who, if they're taking Synthroid, will react to that component. Now, like I said, it doesn't have Synthroid, it doesn't have gluten in it, but it does have all these other things which may cause you to react, including lactose monohydrate. It also does have a slight amount of aluminum in it, but that's technically within the lowest threshold, which is supposed to be safe. Now, however, So the moral of this story is no, it doesn't have gluten, but I think there's a better option when it comes to using thyroid medications, and that is to use cleaner thyroid medications such as Tirosint. And so levothyroxine and Synthroid both suffer from the same problem in that they have all of these many lists of inactive ingredients and excipients, which even though may not be a problem for a lot of people, could still potentially be a problem for you. And you can completely get away from that by using a cleaner medication such as Tirosint, which only has 3 inactive ingredients plus the main ingredient. So I think for a lot of people that's a better option. But that's sort of the moral of the story here. I also wanted to show you here, if you ever have any question about what is in your medication, you can go to this website called PillBox. Again, you can just Google that, type in the name of your medication, and what it will do is it will show you a list of all the inactive ingredients. So if you just clicked on one of these, you can click it by dose. So let's say you're on Synthroid 112, click more information, and it tells you acacia, lactose monohydrate, magnesium stearate, talc, and then all of the reds and dyes and such, and sucrose and so on. So if there's any question, you can do that. But anyway, I wanted to put this information out and show you guys that technically it is gluten-free, but there are other issues inside of it which may cause problems. So if you have any questions about that, please leave them below. But like I said, I think the best solution to this is to just simply switch to a cleaner medication, which should solve the problem. So anyway, if you guys have any questions, leave them below. And otherwise, I will see you guys in the next one.